The Middle Ages are often imagined as a time of noble knights, graceful ladies, and sublime love. But what if we take away the romantic haze and look at that era clearly? This story will lead you through the harsh corridors of a castle where the dreams of a young courtly romantic are mercilessly shattered against dirt, disease, humiliation, and brutal reality. Narrated from the second person perspective, with irony and grim honesty, it reveals just how harsh, dangerous, and far from beautiful everyday life truly was for those who believed in pretty illusions. But before you settle in comfortably, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I'm very curious to see who's joined us. Now, get comfortable. We're about to begin. You arrive at the castle gates, your heart pounding in your chest, your head buzzing with illusions. You are about to become part of something grand, something romantic, something destined. At least, this is what you believe. Instead, as you step inside, reality immediately slaps you across the face, harsh and foul, like the wet slap of a rotting fish. As you pass beneath the heavy stone archway, you imagine intricate tapestries, glittering chandeliers, and perhaps even a fair maiden casting coy glances your way. Instead, your nostrils are filled with the overwhelming stench of urine and spoiled meat. You pause, bewildered, wondering if perhaps you've taken the servant's entrance by mistake. But there is no mistake. The grand hall, supposedly the pride of the realm, is filthy, the walls stained with soot, grease, and some unspeakable grime that no human hand could hope to clean. A hunched figure approaches, dragging a bucket of slop. He gestures vaguely toward you, not even bothering to look up. You there, he grunts, handing you a splintery broom. Follow me. Before you can introduce yourself or mention your finely rehearsed courtly poetry, you find yourself marching behind him through corridors barely lit by sputtering torches. Rats skitter across your boots, daring you to step on them, as servants shout and curse at each other from the darkness. You're led into a courtyard, but it is hardly the romantic place you've dreamed of. A mound rises from the middle, surrounded by a muddy moat. Your guide shoves a shovel into your hands, nodding towards the heap. The latrine's blocked again. Clear it before the evening meal. You gape at him, mouth opening and closing foolishly, like a trout suffocating on air. The latrine, you echo incredulously. Yes, latrine, privy, cesspit, he snaps impatiently, then shuffles off, muttering obscenities about useless young men with fancy dreams. The dream, you realize grimly, is rapidly fading. You begin digging, at first cautiously, then furiously, as the stench invades your senses, turning your stomach violently. Your shovel uncovers sights that no minstrel ever sang about, rotted scraps of meals past, torn rags smeared with unspeakable residues, and something hairy and half decayed that may have once been a cat. Hours later, covered from head to toe in muck that no longer disturbs you, because now you are the muck, you wander back through the castle to find your quarters. They turn out to be a drafty room shared with 12 others. Straw beds line the floor, each more lumpy and suspicious looking than the last. The only available spot is near a hole in the wall through which the wind howls like a tormented ghost. You'll get used to the rats, says a weary voice from the corner, belonging to a man named Jeffrey, who claims he's lived here for 15 years, though by his looks you'd guess 70. His face is covered in boils, and his breath is rancid, like cheese forgotten in the sun. The night brings no relief. Sleep refuses to claim you. Instead, the rustling of vermin fills your ears. The straw beneath your body, crawling with lice, tickles and bites incessantly. Every inch of your skin itches as you scratch helplessly, wondering how long it takes before lice and men become one single entity. Morning arrives, bringing with it the task of fetching water. A simple job, you think at first, until you realize the nearest water source is nearly a mile away, down a steep, muddy slope. Your shoulders scream in agony as you carry the buckets uphill, sloshing half their contents onto yourself. By midday, you smell like a marsh, a scent blending seamlessly with yesterday's latrine extravaganza. Yet hope, stubborn and irrational, refuses to die. You convince yourself this is merely a test. The trials faced by heroes in romances must be overcome. You whisper verses from epic ballads to yourself, but your voice is drowned out by shouting cooks, the clang of pots, and the shrill yelps of chickens being slaughtered for dinner. That evening, as you finally gain a moment of respite near the kitchen hearth, you glimpse Lady Eleanor, daughter of the local lord, walking through the hall. Your heart swells. She wears a velvet gown, shimmering gently in the firelight, her hair coiled elegantly atop her head. Your imagination paints visions of courtly romance, of tender words whispered at twilight. But she pauses, grimacing, and covers her nose with a perfumed handkerchief. You blush, realizing the stench she recoils from is yours. Her gaze meets yours for just a moment, and the disdain on her face nearly knocks you to your knees. She moves quickly past, her silks rustling mockingly as she flees the odor. The romantic visions crumble into ash. Reality sinks deeper. You stink worse than the hogs you feed each afternoon. You retreat silently, shamefaced, determined to scrub yourself clean. But bathing, it turns out, is rarer and more difficult than you imagined. There's only one shared tub, a wooden monstrosity that looks like it hasn't been emptied in weeks. A dozen servants have already used the water, now cold, cloudy, and disturbingly opaque. You step in reluctantly, desperate enough to ignore the slimy feel of someone else's grime sliding over your skin. Emerging from the water, shivering and still somehow dirty, you understand why everyone is filthy here. Cleanliness is an illusion. Dirt is eternal. Days blur into weeks. Your skin thickens into leather from wind and grime. Your dreams of romance fade, replaced by simpler ambitions, perhaps staying dry for an hour or two, or eating bread without first cutting mold off the crust. You realize the castle, the symbol of chivalry and romance, is nothing but a grand pile of stones covered in bird droppings, its walls sheltering endless misery beneath a facade of nobility. You wonder bitterly how many songs about knights and ladies conveniently omit the dung piles and lice infested beds. Yet, as you lie in the itchy straw bed at night, staring at the dark ceiling, part of you, the foolish, hopeful part, still yearns. Perhaps tomorrow things will improve. Perhaps Lady Eleanor will see past your grime. Perhaps romance awaits, hidden behind layers of dirt and despair. Or perhaps you concede wearily, life will simply continue in all its grim monotony, and your only destiny will be to shovel more dung, day after day, until you become indistinguishable from it. Sleep overtakes you, uneasy and restless, your dreams filled with dark corridors, mocking laughter, and an ever present, choking stench. You once believed that a royal feast was an event shimmering with elegance, sophistication, and refined pleasures. The songs and stories you grew up with portrayed lavish banquets as magical gatherings filled with music, dancing, and succulent delicacies laid upon golden platters. But reality, as you have bitterly discovered, bears little resemblance to the romantic fantasies that brought you to this castle. Today, however, brings new hope. You have been chosen, though chosen hardly seems the right word, to assist at the annual feast celebrating Lord Edmund's victory in some petty border skirmish. Your duty is to stand discreetly near the tables, refilling goblets with wine. It seems dignified enough. Certainly, it must be an improvement over your usual tasks of scrubbing floors, emptying chamber pots, or chasing rats out of the pantry. You approach the great hall cautiously, dressed in your least foul smelling clothes, though admittedly they remain stained with the sweat and grime of endless days spent laboring. Even the candlelight, flickering weakly along soot streaked walls, cannot hide the filth. You hope that tonight, perhaps just once, you might glimpse something resembling the elegance you once dreamed of. But stepping inside, you are immediately struck by a sight that crushes your hope with merciless efficiency. The grand feast is more chaos than sophistication. The hall is filled with shouting nobles and drunken laughter, the floor already littered with bones, scraps of bread, and greasy puddles of spilled ale. Your boots stick unpleasantly to the stones, and the overpowering odor of burnt fat mingles cruelly with the tangy scent of unwashed bodies and stale sweat. Lord Edmund, at the head of the table, appears less like a noble victor and more like a greasy bear stuffed hastily into velvet robes. Sweat beads his forehead, mingling with the juices running down his face from a roasted pig he devours with bare hands. Beside him, Lady Eleanor sits stiffly, her expression carefully neutral, though her eyes betray disgust every time her father lets out a belch loud enough to startle the hounds sleeping beneath the table. Your job, simple enough in theory, quickly becomes harrowing. Nobles grab roughly at your sleeve, demanding wine, ale, or mead, often spilling half of it onto your tunic in their drunken clumsiness. You dodge grasping hands and swaying bees, pouring drinks with trembling hands. Finally, you seize a chance to step aside and breathe, but your respite is short lived. A grotesque sound erupts nearby, and you turn to see Sir Gawain, known among servants simply as the bloated, leaning forward with his head buried in a bowl, vomiting violently. No one else seems troubled. Indeed, some applaud him as though it were a noble achievement. You glance away hastily, but the sound and smell linger. The thick, nauseating odor of wine soaked vomit now mingles with the feast's already repugnant atmosphere, making your stomach churn dangerously. Yet no one seems disturbed except you. Perhaps this, too, is normal. As the evening drags onward, platters bearing ever stranger delicacies arrive. Swan roasted whole and coated in honey glaze, jellied eels quivering disturbingly in aspic, boar's head decorated grotesquely with apples crammed into lifeless eyes. You wonder if such elaborate displays mask something darker beneath, perhaps spoiled meat, cleverly hidden under strong spices. Driven by hunger, you manage to sneak a morsel from a tray, passing back to the kitchens. The swan, though beautifully presented, is tough as old leather, the meat sinewy and flavorless. Still, you force it down, grateful for something, anything, to fill your empty belly. Yet soon enough, regret finds you. Your stomach protests violently, twisting and cramping like some monstrous serpent is coiling inside you. Sweat beads on your forehead, your skin pales. You desperately clutch your gut, stumbling away from the table and out into the corridor, away from the revelry and toward the inevitable suffering. Hours later, curled upon filthy straw in your quarters, your body rebels against whatever foulness you consumed. Agonizing pain twists your insides, and your frequent trips to the privy leave you weakened, shaking, and drained of all color and hope. You clutch at your sides, praying to saints whose names you barely recall, promising everything from lifelong celibacy to pilgrimage if only the torment ceases. A servant named Edgar, older and slightly less filthy than the others, shakes his head knowingly when he sees your condition. Dysentery, he sighs heavily, as though you had contracted something as ordinary as a mild cold, from the food or water, probably both. He offers no sympathy, merely the bleak truth. Desperate for relief, you stumble to the apothecary's chamber. The room stinks of herbs, rot, and something uncomfortably close to death. The apothecary, Master Bartholomew, a gaunt figure whose pale, watery eyes stare at you with clinical detachment, nods knowingly. Dysentery, he confirms gravely, as if the word were his daily companion. He reaches onto a shelf, retrieving a jar of something vile and dark. Mouse liver ointment, he explains casually, as though this is perfectly reasonable. Apply liberally, drink nothing but boiled vinegar and water for 2 days. You accept the disgusting remedy without argument. Back in your quarters, applying the foul smelling ointment that makes you gag, you wonder bitterly why no poet ever sang of this humiliation. There are ballads aplenty about battles and heroic deeds, but none about suffering the indignity of mouse ointment or boiled vinegar. 2 miserable days later, you slowly recover. The pains subside enough to let you rise shakily and return to your tasks. Yet your body remains weakened, your confidence crushed beneath the weight of grim reality. The feast, you realize, was not a celebration of victory. It was simply another manifestation of life's ugliness and cruelty. You return to work more humbled than before, bitterly conscious that your romantic dreams of courtly grandeur were nothing but delusions. Nobles, you now see clearly, are simply dirtier and more elaborately dressed versions of yourself, equally vulnerable to sickness, equally indifferent to suffering. Lady Eleanor passes you once more in the corridor, elegant as always, but even her carefully maintained appearance cannot hide the strain behind her eyes. Perhaps she too suffers silently from hidden maladies, from spoiled food or contaminated drink. Perhaps she too applies foul ointments when no one looks. You lower your head, too humbled to look directly at her. Your dreams of impressing her with your wit and grace feel laughably naive. You've been reduced to a pitiful creature whose dignity was stripped away, along with the strength that dysentery drained from your body. Yet somewhere deep inside, you cling stubbornly, irrationally, to a tiny spark of hope. Perhaps your trials are merely tests of character, obstacles set by fate before true romance unfolds. But as another cramp twists your belly cruelly, forcing you toward the privy yet again, you know this hope is foolish. Romance, you begin to suspect, belongs only in songs and stories told by those fortunate enough never to experience the sordid realities of life. You stumble onward, resigned yet stubbornly human, stepping through filth and shadows, haunted by dreams that die slowly, painfully, in the agonizing grip of reality. When you first dreamed of courtly love, you pictured moonlit gardens, whispered vows, and silk gloved hands held softly beneath starry skies. Instead, reality presents itself as a relentless and irritating rash, crawling slowly and mercilessly across your skin. Your heart, stubborn and foolish as ever, has settled upon Lady Matilda, the daughter of a minor lord, whose beauty somehow survives amid the perpetual grime of castle life. Her hair shines faintly golden beneath the smoky torches. Her laughter rings gently, like the chiming of bells you recall from distant childhood dreams. Yet sadly, it appears Lady Matilda barely knows you exist. Each day she sweeps through the halls, accompanied by giggling handmaidens, surrounded by knights whose polished armor blinds you in the sparse daylight. They write poetry for her, tedious verses filled with impossible metaphors, roses, and swans. You despise them secretly, their smug expressions, their confident smiles, their total ignorance of latrine duty or festering rashes. Determined to prove yourself, you resolve to compose a poem. You spend sleepless nights hunched over scraps of parchment you pilfered from the refuse pile, because servants like yourself rarely have access to such luxuries. Your quill, stolen from an unsuspecting goose, scratches awkwardly across the page, and the ink, made from crushed berries and soot, is sticky, foul smelling, and prone to smudging. After hours of labor, you stand nervously in the shadowed corner of the main hall, waiting for your moment. Lady Matilda is seated elegantly near the hearth, surrounded as usual by admirers who sip wine and laugh lightly. You step forward, heart hammering wildly, clutching your poem like a shield. My Lady Matilda, you say, your voice trembling audibly, may I present my humble poem? A momentary silence descends, thick as porridge. Lady Matilda tilts her head gracefully, waiting patiently, her eyes half lidded with amusement. You clear your throat and begin. Thy beauty shines like the moon, and roses pale beside thy bloom. Thine eyes, they pierce my gloom. Lady, my heart doth swoon. Your voice cracks embarrassingly on the final word. Silence returns, heavier this time. Lady Matilda blinks. Her admirers cough awkwardly, suppressing smiles behind their sleeves. Finally, Matilda giggles, a silvery sound that should bring delight, but instead feels like a dagger between your ribs. How charming, she murmurs lightly before turning away. The crowd resumes their conversation as though nothing had occurred. You shrink back into the shadows, humiliated, wishing desperately for invisibility. But embarrassment is merely the beginning of your troubles. In your desperation to appeal to Lady Matilda, you also borrowed, without asking, a flask of scented oil from the apothecary. You were convinced that its fragrance would transform you from an unnoticed servant into a figure of mysterious allure. You liberally applied the oily concoction to your chest and neck, hoping it would mask the stench of months of labor. Within hours, however, your skin begins to rebel. An intense burning sensation spreads across your torso, followed by a blistering, maddening itch. By evening, bright red welts rise upon your skin, throbbing painfully. Horrified, you seek help from Edgar, the senior servant, whose weary face now regards you with barely concealed irritation. That's nobleman's rash, he says flatly, inspecting your angry skin. You used that fancy oil, didn't you? You nod miserably. You're allergic, boy. Serves you right. Noble things aren't meant for the likes of us. You beg Edgar for relief, and he fetches a concoction, lard mixed with vinegar and crushed garlic, that stings even more fiercely when applied. For days, you suffer silently, scratching desperately until blood seeps through your ragged shirt. Sleep becomes a distant memory, replaced by endless torment and fevered dreams of Lady Matilda laughing at your misery. Just when you think your humiliation can deepen no further, gossip reaches your ears. Lady Matilda, it turns out, is not the unattainable paragon you envisioned. Whispers in dim hallways speak of her nightly escapades, secret rendezvous with several knights, even the low-born stablemaster. Your poem, earnest and hopelessly romantic, was nothing but comic relief in her ongoing game of amorous conquest. Disillusioned, you sink into despair. Your rash heals slowly, leaving behind rough, reddened skin and bitter lessons learned. You understand now that courtly love is merely another fiction invented by those fortunate enough never to itch, bleed, or suffer humiliation. Meanwhile, reality remains relentless. Your life is filled with tedious labor, aching muscles, lice infested bedding, and constant hunger. Romance, poetry, and scented oils are luxuries reserved for the privileged, who use them as toys to amuse themselves between feasts and meaningless tournaments. Yet somehow, foolishly, stubbornly, you cannot entirely extinguish the hope in your heart. You catch yourself begging after Lady Matilda still, despite knowing her flaws, her vanity, her indifference. Perhaps love itself is little more than an irritating rash, an affliction impossible to entirely eradicate, leaving permanent scars that itch whenever memory is triggered. One morning, as dawn breaks gray and grim across the castle, you find yourself in the kitchen peeling endless mountains of turnips. Your fingers, cracked and raw, move mechanically, your mind numb from exhaustion. Through the open window, you hear laughter and glance upward. Lady Matilda walks by outside, arm in arm with one of the knights, whose poetry actually rhymes. Her laughter echoes cruelly. Briefly, her eyes catch yours through the kitchen window. She smiles faintly, the same careless amusement that wounded you once before. This time, however, it only deepens your bitterness. Later, Edgar sits beside you, eating stale bread crusts without enthusiasm. You're lucky, he says, noticing your weary expression. How so, you mutter sarcastically. At least you learned quickly. Love, he says bitterly, chewing slowly, is a disease worse than any rash. Better to itch than suffer a broken heart. You say nothing, silently conceding the truth in his words. Yet, deep within, something fragile and absurd persists. Love, or at least its painful illusion, is a sickness from which you fear you might never recover. Night falls, cold and damp, and you lie again on straw crawling with vermin. Sleep eludes you, replaced instead by relentless scratching and quiet misery. You reflect bitterly on your dreams of courtly romance. You imagined soft hands, whispered promises, and tender kisses beneath the moonlight. Instead, reality has left you scarred, itching, humiliated, and wise enough now to see that love, in this harsh, filthy world, was never beautiful. It was always ugly, painful, and agonizingly real. As you close your eyes, resigning yourself to another sleepless night, you recognize at last the grim truth of medieval romance. Love here is neither pure nor noble. It is dirty, infected, and endlessly painful. Yet, like your persistent rash, it stubbornly refuses to disappear, lingering cruelly, a constant reminder that reality always has its way, grimy, bleak, and utterly without mercy. You once dreamed of knighthood as something glorious, a noble blend of bravery, elegance, and honor. Songs praised knights as proud warriors in shining armor, heroes who jousted for love and honor. But here, within the grim confines of castle life, knighthood seems more like a bloody joke than anything resembling glory. Still, when the chance arises to become a squire, assisting Sir Baldwin during the annual tournament, your foolish heart leaps at the opportunity. You imagine yourself standing proudly beside the knight, armor polished, banners fluttering, Lady Matilda's admiring gaze finally noticing your worth. The morning of the tournament dawns cold and dreary, heavy mist clinging stubbornly to the muddy field. Spectators gather, shivering in damp cloaks. You arrive early to prepare Sir Baldwin's armor, a tedious task requiring hours of scrubbing rust, blood, and grime from joints that haven't moved freely in decades. When the knight himself finally appears, you're stunned. Far from the romantic figure of legend, Sir Baldwin is a squat, sour faced man whose belly strains painfully against the armor you have labored to polish. His breath reeks of ale, his hair hangs greasy beneath a rusting helmet. He eyes you disdainfully, snapping orders like a petty tyrant. Lift that helmet, boy, and mind you don't dent it. You strain to lift the iron helmet, so heavy it feels as if you've been asked to raise a horse. Your arms tremble under its weight, your fingers slipping in panic. Sir Baldwin snorts derisively. Useless, he mutters. I've seen squires half your size carry twice the load. The tournament itself is equally disheartening. Knights parade in rusting armor, their horses agitated, foam dripping from jaws as their hooves churn through the mud. Banners flutter weakly, the colors faded and torn. The trumpets sound, thin and off key, more like dying geese than instruments heralding heroic deeds. Yet the crowd cheers wildly, desperate for any spectacle to distract them from the monotony and misery of daily life. You position yourself nervously by Sir Baldwin's horse, praying fervently to saints you barely remember, hoping you won't embarrass yourself. Sir Baldwin mounts his steed awkwardly, groaning audibly as the horse shuffles beneath his weight. He raises a lance that seems twice his height, waving it clumsily toward Lady Matilda in the stands. She feigns interest, waving politely while stifling a yawn behind her handkerchief. Then, without warning, the joust begins. Horses thunder forward, mud splattering your face. The knights collide brutally, armor clanging deafeningly, lances shattering with alarming violence. Spectators cheer each collision, their voices harsh and bloodthirsty. Suddenly, it's Sir Baldwin's turn. He spurs his horse forward, charging clumsily toward his opponent, a towering knight whose armor gleams menacingly despite patches of rust. You watch, heart in your throat, as the lances crash violently. Baldwin's lance shatters uselessly, while his opponent's strikes true, slamming into Baldwin's chest and throwing him from the saddle like a sack of rotting potatoes. Sir Baldwin crashes heavily to the ground, mud and filth spraying upward as he lands with a sickening crack. For a long moment, silence hangs thickly over the field. Slowly, he tries to rise, but his body remains twisted grotesquely in the muck. He bellows in agony, his voice thick with pain and humiliation. You rush forward instinctively, driven by pity rather than loyalty. But the moment you reach him, the crowd erupts in cruel laughter. Even Lady Matilda chuckles behind her fan, amused by the fallen knight flailing helplessly like an overturned beetle. Help me, fool! Baldwin screams, clutching your sleeve desperately. I think, I think my back is broken. You hesitate, unsure how to move him without worsening his injury. Others come forward, Two bored looking men hauling Baldwin roughly from the field as he howls with fresh agony. No one seems particularly concerned, as though this violence is just another routine occurrence. After Baldwin is carried away, the knights resume their jousting, indifferent to the suffering inflicted moments ago. You are left alone, shaken, staring numbly at the churned earth, stained with blood and discarded armor fragments. Later, Edgar finds you staring blankly at the battlefield. Thought it'd be different, didn't you? He asks knowingly. Glory isn't real, lad. Knights are fools, and tournaments are nothing but cruelty dressed in iron. You nod silently, your dreams of knighthood dissolving in the cold drizzle. Edgar sighs, patting your shoulder roughly. Come, he says wearily. Baldwin needs tending. He'll probably never walk again. In the dark, musty chamber used as the infirmary, Baldwin lies moaning softly. His armor is stripped away, revealing bruises blossoming grotesquely across his flesh. The healer, a frail old man who reeks of herbs and decay, shakes his head grimly. His spine's cracked, he says, as though discussing something mundane like spoiled meat. Might recover, might not. Baldwin's eyes meet yours, filled with pain, fear, and a desperate helplessness you recognize immediately. This was no brave hero, no shining knight, just another wretched man destroyed by the merciless world he inhabited. Days pass, and Baldwin's condition worsens. He raves in fevered agony, often screaming in the night. You sit beside him, applying vile smelling poultices and feeling your dreams die slowly alongside him. One evening, Baldwin's fever finally breaks, but the man left behind is broken beyond recognition. He gazes blankly at the ceiling, barely speaking, lost in bitterness and despair. I was once like you, he whispers hoarsely, eyes empty. I believed in honor, glory, all lies. The poets, they fooled us all. You listen quietly, seeing in him your own fate, reflected, twisted, and brutalized by reality. Knighthood, like romance, like honor, is revealed as nothing but a fragile illusion, easily shattered. Outside, rain pounds relentlessly against stone walls, washing away blood and grime from the tournament grounds, but never the suffering lingering beneath. The castle itself seems to mock you, its shadowy halls echoing with the sounds of broken dreams. Later, alone in your filthy bed, muscles aching fiercely from endless labor, you ponder Baldwin's words. Once again, your youthful illusions have been torn away, leaving raw and painful truths. Yet somehow, foolishly, you cannot entirely abandon hope. Perhaps honor and bravery still matter, even if only to fools like you. But when sleep finally comes, it brings no relief, only nightmares of shattering lances, mud streaked armor, and Baldwin's anguished cries. You awaken sweating, shaken, knowing that knighthood holds no promise, only pain, humiliation, and broken bodies left lying in the mud. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the bitter realization that heroism is a romantic lie. Knights are fragile men hiding behind iron masks, and glory is nothing more than a cracked spine and a muddy, forgotten field. Tomorrow, Like every day before, you will rise early, dragging your exhausted body through endless tasks. Yet tonight, beneath cold stars indifferent to your suffering, you finally accept the grim truth. Knighthood, like so many dreams before it, is nothing but a cruel illusion, shattered in the merciless grip of reality. You always imagined romance as an elegant dance, a delicate exchange of whispered secrets beneath silken banners and perfumed gardens. You thought you could tame love, harness it through poetry and gentle words. But the castle taught you otherwise. Reality crushed each illusion slowly and ruthlessly, leaving nothing but bitterness and emptiness behind. Yet stubbornly, desperately, you cling to a final hope, confessing your true feelings to Lady Matilda. Surely, honesty might prevail where poetry and stolen perfumes failed. Perhaps, at long last, your sincerity might touch her heart. As the day of your planned confession approaches, you prepare carefully, scrubbing yourself with gritty soap made from lye and ashes, combing your tangled hair, borrowing clothes slightly less ragged from Edgar's trunk. Still, you look nothing like a gallant courtier, merely a cleaner version of the lowly servant you've always been. At twilight, you gather every ounce of courage and stand nervously in the corridor outside the ladies' quarters. Your heart thuds painfully, palms slick with sweat. At last, the heavy wooden door swings open and Lady Matilda emerges, radiant even in the dim candlelight. My lady, you stammer, voice trembling. She pauses, regarding you with polite confusion. Yes, I. Your tongue thickens, words evaporating. You take a breath. I must confess something. She raises one perfectly groomed eyebrow, waiting expectantly. My lady, I love you, truly, deeply. Silence fills the corridor, thick and suffocating. Matilda blinks once, twice, as if uncertain she heard correctly. Then, with maddening calmness, she smiles politely. How sweet! You're very kind, she replies gently, pity mingling with indifference. But tomorrow I leave the castle. I'm marrying Lord Henry of Greystone. Your heart plummets through your chest, landing somewhere deep and cold inside your stomach. Lord Henry is twice her age, rich, gout ridden, and utterly repulsive. Yet Matilda seems perfectly unbothered. Marriage? You whisper numbly. Yes, she says lightly. A fine match, they say. Lands, title, wealth, everything a girl dreams of. She smiles again, this time utterly dismissive, and sweeps past you without a backward glance. The door shuts heavily behind her, leaving you alone in the dark, your dreams shattered as effectively as glass beneath a heavy boot. That night, sleep eludes you entirely. You lie awake in the filthy straw, staring blankly at shadows flickering across the ceiling. Edgar, sensing your misery, says nothing. He merely sighs knowingly, rolling over in silence. Days pass slowly afterward, each one gray and lifeless. The castle resumes its relentless rhythm, floors scrubbed, pots emptied, endless filth cleared away only to return hours later. Life continues, indifferent to your heartbreak. Driven by despair, you attempt one final, desperate gesture, you write a song, a ballad of sorrow and longing, carefully composed during late nights by flickering candlelight. Your song is raw, sincere, without pretension or fancy metaphors. It speaks plainly of a heart broken beyond repair. When at last the song is finished, you find courage enough to sing it in the castle's hall, hoping someone, anyone, might hear your voice and understand your pain. You stand nervously by the hearth, strumming a battered lute borrowed from Edgar, voice trembling as you sing, "My lady fair, who broke my heart, you pierced my soul, tore it apart. Yet still I linger, bound by chains, forever haunted by love's pains." The hall remains silent for a moment, then erupts into laughter, coarse and mocking. Nobles and servants alike point, amused by your earnest misery. Your voice falters, humiliated. The lute slips from your hands, cracking as it hits the cold stone floor. As the laughter subsides, one of the older knights calls loudly, "Sing us another, fool! Your pain is good entertainment." Cheeks burning, you retreat hastily, humiliation scorching your heart. Your sincere emotion, once again, was nothing but amusement for others. You realize now, too late, that poetry, music, even honesty itself hold no value here. They are simply toys, distractions from the harshness of life. Weeks pass, and Lady Matilda departs the castle in a grand procession heading toward her loveless marriage. You watch silently from a distance as she rides away, her elegant form fading into the horizon. Beside you, Edgar shakes his head. "Forget her," he mutters gently. "Dreams of love belong only to those who've never shoveled dung." You nod silently, finally understanding. Dreams of love, honor, beauty are illusions woven by poets who never truly lived. Reality, here in this castle, was always filthy, painful, and brutally indifferent. Slowly, relentlessly, your illusions die, your youthful hopes fade away, leaving only weariness and bitter acceptance. Days blur together, gray dawns, endless labor, restless nights filled with itchy straw and whispering vermin. Yet strangely, as you surrender your dreams, life becomes easier. No longer chasing impalpable fantasies, you settle into the castle's grim routine. Your skin hardens beneath dirt and calluses. Your heart grows numb, and the ache in your chest slowly subsides. Months turn to years, and one day, Edgar lies dying in his corner of the servants' quarters. He beckons you close, his aged face creased with pain. "You survived," he whispers weakly. "Most don't. You learned." You grasp his frail hand, nodding solemnly. "I learned that reality is merciless, cruel, and indifferent." He smiles faintly. "Good. Then perhaps you'll survive longer than me." Edgar passes quietly, and you bury him in the pauper's graveyard behind the castle. Standing over his grave, muddy and exhausted, you feel something unexpected: relief. Edgar was finally free from filth, humiliation, and broken dreams. Perhaps someday you'll earn such peace as well. Life continues in monotonous rhythm. You age quickly, worn prematurely old by hardship and bitter wisdom. Romance no longer crosses your mind. Poetry feels distant, foolishly naive. Instead, you spend your days hauling slops, scrubbing floors, surviving in the shadows. Yet occasionally, late at night, as wind howls mournfully through cracks in the castle walls, you find yourself humming the song you once composed, your lament for Lady Matilda. Its melody echoes softly, bitterly through empty corridors, unheard by anyone but yourself. Reality has taught you many harsh lessons. Love is illusion, honor meaningless, and dreams merely fragile deceptions. But in those quiet moments, humming softly, you find a strange comfort. Your suffering, once a torment, now feels oddly beautiful, an honest testament to a heart broken, yet still beating defiantly beneath layers of grime and despair. At last, you truly understand. Romance was never about soft hands, moonlit gardens, or poetic verses whispered beneath the stars. True romance, grimly enough, was this: surviving relentless pain, enduring endless humiliation, yet somehow, stubbornly, finding beauty in your own quiet suffering. So you live on, unseen and unheard, humming softly to yourself in the dark, a silent poet composing songs meant only for deaf ears, in a castle whose walls echo endlessly with the bitter laughter of broken dreams.